When war broke out in Europe in 1939, the people of the United States didn't really want a part of it, but the United States government did. So they issued a series of propaganda images to promote the war effort. So after tonight, you should be able to understand the themes and concepts in U.S. propaganda, analyze primary source propaganda, and understand the themes and motifs, and recognize U.S. sentiments from the onset of the war and beyond. Citizens of the U.S. were very apprehensive about entering World War II. They were still shocked after the First World War. It was a very brutal war, and it was something that they never experienced before, so they needed convincing to get behind the war effort. And as you can see on the right, the U.S. issued a series of propaganda images trying to convince U.S. citizens to get behind the war effort. So after they actually entered the war, they needed to recruit soldiers, and the target recruits were typically young white males. And Uncle Sam, as you can see on the right, is an iconic image of U.S. patriotism and their recruiting tactics. World War II actually came at a somewhat convenient time for the United States, in that we were emerging from the Great Depression, and while resources were scarce, we needed a workforce to support the war effort. So production was ramped up, and we were manufacturing guns, ships, tanks, boats, any military supplies. So it actually helped us emerge from the depths of the Great Depression. So many young men, though, were leaving for war, so the workforce was being depleted. Propaganda was then created to encourage citizens who weren't engaged directly in military conflict to work harder, and economic success and manufacturing were crucial to winning the war. And as you can see on the right, work to win or you'll work for him, and him obviously is Hitler. So working in production was seen as key to winning the war and beating the fascists. And with such a depleted workforce, women were encouraged to join the workforce and get into blue-collar work. And Rosie the Riveter, as you can see on the right, is an iconic image encouraging women to join the war effort. And as you can see, it's very patriotic. She's got the red and white in her bandana and the blue shirt, and of course a blue collar, and she's kind of portrayed as a more masculine, I suppose, image of a woman joining the blue collar field. But there was a lot of paranoia, and the U.S. feared spies and Nazi counterintelligence, so a series of propaganda images were released encouraging citizens of the U.S. to not discuss matters of war in public. So as you can see, loose lips might sink ships, and here you can see loose talk can cost lives. And of course, on the bench in the image on the left, you can see Hitler with a very large ear eavesdropping on a presumed veteran talking to his lady friend. And of course, on the right, we've got our good friend Uncle Sam, and he's counting on you. And just don't discuss troop movements, ship sailings, and war equipment. And of course, these images were more targeted towards veterans or members of the military who have access to this kind of knowledge and know about military affairs before the public does. War bonds were used to finance the war effort, and there was a great encouragement to buy them. Citizens were encouraged to buy war bonds and help finance the war, and it was seen as a patriotic act if you were buying war bonds, investing in war bonds. It was seen as aiding the country and doing your service, doing your part in the war effort. And as a side note, they helped to impede inflation because they actually took money out of circulation. and there was a huge emphasis on conservation. The lack of resources upon entering the war, citizens needed to conserve in order to supply our troops. And so carpooling and victory gardens, general forms of conservation and frugality, they were seen as patriotic and aiding the Allied cause. And as you can see on the right, you've got this happy soldier enjoying his cup of coffee, presumably, and it's encouraging you to ration, and so that our troops can have the resources that you might give up in your frugality. So you can see here, this is on the left, this is a image encouraging carpooling. Of course, if you have an empty seat, Hitler's going to ride in it, and that's encouraging saving gas and oil, and ironically rubber as well is used a lot by the military, so they're encouraging you to get your tires checked and that kind of thing. And then, of course, on the right, you've got war gardens, which were, backyard gardens, where you can grow your own food so that the U.S. doesn't have to, and they can commit resources to something else. And, of course, propaganda was pervasive. You've got, of course, the appearance of Captain America, as you may be familiar with, fighting for the armed forces, fighting the fascists and the Nazis. And then on the right, Walt Disney, actually, the Disney company was paid to produce propaganda images and cartoons supporting the U.S. war effort. So in class, we need to watch Eric's lecture on soapstone and be prepared to analyze a primary source propaganda image and reflect on the concepts, themes, and implications of the image.